Welcome to the OddsBreakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 54 of 2021. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the OddsBreakers. Follow us on social media / the OddsBreakers. This episode is being brought to you by footballcontest.com. To get into the massive Las Vegas football contest, please visit our guy Maddie at footballcontest.com to sign up for the Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, or the Westgate Super Contest. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and sponsor the website and the podcast, we'd love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For 6 more days, you can get my premium plays for the low price of $25 a month. Otherwise, it's going up to $100. If not me, you can check out any of our other handicappers at theoddsbreakers.com. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. We have a great show for you today because Ralph Michaels from Wagertalk.com and Chris Fallica from ESPN College Game Day is back to break down and preview the 2021 college football season. We're going to look at futures, we're going to look at season win totals, and we're going to look at just an overall preview on what we think could happen during the 2021 season. Towards the end of the show, I'm going to get into a little UFC on ESPN 29 and give you a free play for some MMA action for the weekend. Before Chris and Ralph comes on, I want to remind you that we are running a promotion. If you want to become a member and get some premium plays with any of our handicappers, we're giving away a free t-shirt for you that says the OddsBreakers on it. So that's going to be good until October 1st. If you are an experienced handicapper and would like to contribute and benefit from the oddsbreakers.com, please contact us via Twitter at the OddsBreakers or the website, theoddsbreakers.com. My friends, we go pretty long today going into every single football conference. So without further ado, let's get on Mr. Ralph Michaels and Mr. Chris Fallica. It's a great time of year coming up because college football is right around the corner, and that means you need the best of the best handicappers to come on to discuss some previews, possibly some season win totals, and some plays. I'm very excited to welcome back Mr. Chris Fallica from ESPN College Game Day and Wagertalk's Ralph Michaels to the show. You can follow them on Twitter at Chris, Fallica, and Cal Sports LV. Guys, thanks so much for coming back on the show. I hope you guys are all rested up from the summer here. Chris, I know you're bouncing around Europe a little bit, my man.
Yeah, we had a great time. Finally, we made up for the trip that we were supposed to take last May and June of 2020, which obviously didn't happen, and we went across northern Italy and Milan, Cinque Bergamo, Turin, Verona, Como, and wound up in Venice. And it was great. It was just 10 days of walking around, seeing great sights, eating great food, and just taking in some nice weather. And it felt really good just to be out and about again.
Man, yeah. Great to go on vacation, kind of breathe before the whole season starts out for sure. I just went to Key West once, and that was in June. Didn't do a ton other, but that was a fun place to be.
It is.
I was there twice now. That was my second time, but man, that place doesn't change. It's crazy. It's a great time. I recommend anybody doing it. Did about 5 days there at a nice place, the Capitana, a newly remodeled hotel. And Ralph, what did you do this summer?
You know, I had the summer of I'm taking a vacation next month, and it never worked out. So I am owed a couple. So,
well,
man, and now all of a sudden football and basketball starts, so that'll be in April. So I let one get away this year. So unfortunately, I had my nose to the grindstone. I'll just say I was working on football all summer long.
All right. Well, if you get a little irritated,
what's wrong with that?
I'll understand if you're a little
You'll
irritated.
you'll be more prepared than Kiev and I. That's for sure.
Yeah, probably. That's for sure, right? Well, that's great news because we have a lot to talk about here. We're just going to kind of keep it high level a little bit. If you have a play, go conference to conference here, and at the end, we'll talk about a best bet for week 1. So, great stuff. Let's start right away in the American Athletic Conference here, and I'll start out. And SMU is kind of the team I'm looking at a little bit here. I got to tell you, the 6.5 win total I think is a little bit low. I like Tanner Mordecai, highly touted guy from Oklahoma that transferred in. I like how they returned 10 defensive starters on this team. Jahari Rogers is a nice transfer from Florida too. Sonny Dykes says this group has improved. And I got to believe that. Well, I'm going to try to believe that, hopefully, so I can hit this win total. But, that was kind of the question last year. I love their schedule at SMU. They're getting Abilene Christian, North Texas, Louisiana Tech, non-conference stuff, very easy. Now, the TCU's probably a loss, but then they get South Florida, Tulane, UCF, and Tulsa all at home. So I see the 6.5 wins getting there a lot easier when you have a non-conference looking like that. Now, they have to go to Cincinnati and Memphis, but I'm a little bit down on Memphis this year. Second time without Mike Norvell there, second year, and lots of changes. They lost their quarterback and Brady White. So as far as going to Cincinnati, I'm okay with that because you're going to lose to them at home anyway, so you're not sacrificing that home loss. So I'm taking over the 6.5. Now, their future is something you can get cute with, but I just think Cincinnati is so strong this year that I didn't really mess with it. I see it at 22-1, 25-1. And
it's not the worst stab at all.
Yeah, and so I'm considering. I didn't take it yet, but I was seeing what you guys' thoughts are.
I mean, you failed to mention as well Jim Leavitt, now defensive coordinator, along with all of those returning starters at SMU. And Steve and I actually talked about SMU on our pod that we did earlier this week, and we both were higher on SMU as well. And the one question that I posed to him when you talked about Cincinnati being so strong is Bearcats now have all of these national expectations, and they have those 2 games at Indiana and Notre Dame where if they lose those games, will they be driven and motivated enough to simply be like, okay, let's win the American one more time and get back to the New Year's 6 and not really, and because right now they're the highest ranked Group of 5 team ever in the preseason poll in the playoff era. So like people expect them to legitimately have a chance to make the playoffs. So if those goals go by the wayside, how do the Bearcats and Luke Fickell respond to that? That'll be interesting to see because that could, in theory, open it up a little bit more for some other teams in the American.
Good point. And wait, are they still on the same side? Or are they doing the sides again this year? Because in 2020 they didn't divisions.
I'm getting confused on what they're doing
they
this
are
year.
Not. They are just okay. Running 1 through 12 and not having divisions.
Okay, thank you, Ralph. And that's kind of what a big question is. Yeah. I mean, if they're on the same side as Cincinnati, that certainly helps because it's now it's just best record. So that you can look at it that way. Anybody on the same side as Cincinnati would benefit from this. But Ralph, what do you have for the American Athletic?
Yeah, Kiev, you mentioned one important thought, and it was they get Cincinnati on the road, and that's good. When you're looking to bet win totals, you want your winnable games at home. It's much tougher to go in a pick'em game and win on the road than it is those pick'em games at home. So I am completely with you. My 1 over/under win total was SMU. There were even some 6s out there. I found it at one place. So completely agree with you. When you look at SMU's schedule, you talked about the easy beginning. Well, they're going to be a 30-point favorite, a 20-point favorite, a 12-point favorite, and 12.5-point favorite. Those are based on my power ratings, not the Vegas line. But a 12-point favorite or more in 4 of their first 5 games. You're going to have a stretch late in the year at Memphis, UCF, and Cincinnati. And like Chris mentioned with Cincinnati, if you have a defeatist attitude, that SMU win total may very well come down to that Tulsa game on the last game of the year. So SMU is going to need to be able to potentially be off 3 straight losses and win that home finale to take it. One long shot as far as the conference play goes, I made a play on Tulsa at 18-1. Right now, they're 17-1. I love the coaching job they have. They're at Cincinnati November 6th, but that doesn't mean that can't be their only loss. They get Houston at home on a Friday night, and they don't play UCF. So it's an advantageous schedule for them. And if you look at what their defense did last year, yeah, they had Zaven Collins, so he made them special. But they only had 4 returning starters on defense. A much improved defense. The coaches mentioned that he's very comfortable with his new quarterback. So Tulsa for me, SMU over win total, Tulsa a long shot for me to win the AAC.
I looked at Tulsa, and I liked the fact that they returned a ton of production there. Zaven Collins is gone, and he was obviously the heart and soul of that defense. So I wonder if that they regrouped there a little bit. I mean, with all the other returning guys, you'd have to think so. Great point that they're not playing UCF. So I also looked at that one. Chris, was
one more point to bring up, Kiev. Just as we mentioned returning starters, let's remember everyone has a lot of returning starters. There are only 4 teams this year with single-digit starters, and over the last 10 years, the average returning starter in college football was 11.1 per team. This year, it's almost 15. So when 15's in your average, there's going to be a lot of teams with a lot of returning starters in that 17, 18, and 19 mode.
Yeah, I agreed. I even saw a stat that it was at 16 somewhere, and maybe that was a while ago, and it went down to 15. Totally agree. Don't go by returning starters unless you know there's a lot that's not coming back. Great point there, Ralph. Chris, was SMU your comment then for the AAC?
No, my favorite play and the one play that I have made already in the American is Temple under their season win total, and then out at the South Point, Chris Andrews and those guys posted conference wins only. And I like their under 1.5 conference wins as well. I think Temple now is all of the coaching turnover, changes that they've had. I think it's finally starting to catch up with them a little bit. This is a team last year that very easily could have lost to South Florida. And if you look, like Ralph was talking about, the games you want at home and the winnable ones, well, the winnable games for Temple, East Carolina, South Florida, maybe Tulsa, like Akron, they're all on the road. They're not going to beat home games are Memphis, UCF, Houston, and then Navy. They're not going to beat any of those teams. So I'd be shocked if Temple won 2 American games, and I'd also be surprised if Temple won 4 regular season games. So I think Temple under on the Owls this year is one of my stronger win total feels.
Chris, and that Temple play, I have them as a 4-point home dog to Navy and a 7.1 dog to USF. Every other game, and they're 11-point dog or more in conference play. So certainly concur with that play. Yeah,
I'm not a fan of Temple this year either, and they've been since Carey. They've been really going down, so agree with that one. Let's move into the ACC then here, and I'm going to let Chris start it out because he's probably going with Miami to win the conference as well as
yeah, right,
as well as the championship.
Now, I got a couple of interesting thoughts on the ACC, and that was how to play it. I made a bet on Sam Howell to win the Heisman at 15-1, and my thought process there was, if North Carolina wins the ACC, you're not going, and they beat Clemson in the title game, he's going to win the Heisman if they're up 12-1. But they're not going to be plus 1,500 on the money line in that ACC championship game should they get there. So I kind of tried to create a little additional value on North Carolina there to win the ACC by just simply betting Howell to win the Heisman because I think he does have a chance. I think this is a North Carolina team that people are going to overreact a little bit to everything that they lost, but Josh Downs is going to be a star. The defense is going to be infinitely better than it was last year. Bo Corrales comes back at wide receiver as well. Todd Chandler transfers in from Tennessee. They're going to be fine at running back. They're going to need one of the other wide receivers to step up, but I think with an experienced offensive line, a great quarterback, and a dynamic playmaker there as well. They're going to be fine. And it's a roster that, like, you hear about team and camaraderie. They play for each other. They love each other. They respect each other. So I like North Carolina to potentially win the ACC, and I tried to pin on that Howell Heisman. The win total under that I liked was Louisville, and I got it at 6.5. And I don't know if any 6.5s are still out there. But you look at the schedule that they have in the non-conference. You've got UCF. You've got Kentucky. You've got Ole Miss. There's likely 3 losses right there. Turned the ball over a ton last year. Since 2016, no team has allowed more sacks in the country. I thought Scott Satterfield would have this thing like on an upward trend after ridding himself of the mess left by Bobby Petrino. But the offseason there was really weird. He was kind of out hunting for jobs. So I'm not sure. I get a bad vibe here. And then you look at the offense. They struggled against every good defense they faced last year, and that was with JV and Hawkins, Des Fitzpatrick, and Tutu Atwell. Now they're gone. McCaffrey was on campus for like a day, and now it looks like Cunningham will be the guy at quarterback again. But I don't get a good vibe about Louisville at all. BC and NC State should be better as well, and they're going to have to play them. So I love Louisville under at 6.5. 6, opens up the opportunity for a push, but I'm down on the Cardinals this year.
Yeah, so I'm actually Louisville was under 6.5 was one of my plays to give out here, and I agree. What a fantastic setup for the under when you have Ole Miss, UCF, and Kentucky. That's a brutal non-conference stat. I don't like the fact they lost Tutu Atwell. And Des Fitzpatrick and Javion Hawkins. I think those are all big losses for them. And, Scott Satterfield, shaky, man. You hear all these rumors about the guy,
Yep.
Trying to leave and inquiring with people. Doesn't seem happy there. They get Clemson and Boston College. So the under is good for me, being that Clemson, Boston College is right there. So I completely agree. Any comments, Ralph?
Yeah, I look at Louisville. Going through my power ratings, I have them favored in basically 4 games. Duke, Syracuse, a small favorite against Virginia and Eastern Kentucky. So you have to learn to win those games. And as you said, they play Boston College and Wake Forest, 2 teams that I'm going to talk about. I like BC over 7. I really like this team. You have a coach that, came from the NFL, had the first year with no prep. Now you have that NFL workman's-like mentality, a team with 17 returning starters. When I broke down their schedule based on my power ratings, I am a double-digit favorite in 4 games, a favorite over a field goal in 1, a double-digit dog in only 1, and then they have 6 games between the 3s. And that's what happens a lot of times with win totals. You have to win those games between the 3s. I think they do. I like their schedule. You have 3 very, very winnable games in a non-conference with Colgate, Massachusetts, and Temple. Let's knock those 3 as automatic wins. Syracuse is the other. They're going to lose at Clemson, but then they get a break. So to me, you're going to go at least 3-0. You're going to go 3-0 or 3-1 in non-conference play. You're going to lose to Clemson, but you get a break to reset, and then you face all those teams between the 3s. Another team that I didn't bet the win total, but for me, they look to be a very, very much a play-on team. I'm very high on this Wake Forest team. I think Wake Forest is always that sneaker team that loses games but tends to cover, plays well as a dog. They're going to be in a favorites role a couple times this year, more than they've been in the past. But to me, not a bettable action to take today, but clearly a team that I have circled looking at September at the Wake Forest Demon Deacons.
Yeah, there was another one I looked at. I remember in the bowl game, Wisconsin did jump their routes a few times and scored, but they really kind of came back at the end. And I didn't see Wisconsin giving it to them. They're still trying on defense, and they scored 3 or 4 touchdowns in the 3rd/4th. It wasn't like Wisconsin was giving up. They have a very good offense at Wake. So I didn't touch them because I thought it was a tad bit high for me right now, right? But it did go up. So you might have gotten it at a good number. The one I have is I tried to sell this to Chris earlier by text message a couple weeks back, but I'm not sure if he was buying it yet. But we'll see, because I like the Duke Blue Devils over 3.5. And no, this is not basketball. But I mean, when you start, and they were terrible last year. They were terrible. But I've never seen David Cutcliffe, besides this last year, not have a 5, 6, or 7 win team. Their first 4 games are Charlotte, who they blew away last year, NC A&T, right? North Carolina A&T, Northwestern at home, who it's just probably a loss, but Northwestern, they don't return much production at all. They're one of those single-digit teams you guys probably pointed out. And then they get Kansas, and I love Lance Leopold hire, but I don't think he's ready quite yet to turn that Kansas team around. So if they just get 3 of those wins, they just need 1 ACC win. Some options are Georgia Tech at home, Pittsburgh at home, the Louisville total that Chris and I just went under, maybe at Wake, but probably not. But hey, plenty of options there. Chris, you buy it?
I can't get there with Duke. I know turnovers are a cyclical thing, and Chase Bryce was a turnover machine last year before he now left for Appalachian State. But the fan in me, the college football fan in me, doesn't want to see David Cutcliffe go out like this because he did so much good at Duke, turning them around from a doormat to a team that played for the ACC title, won ball games, and really took them out of the doormat status of that league. But 1-9 last year, outgained by a bunch of yards, allowed 36 sacks. We'll see.
All right. Well, at least you're not going under.
Chris, you got to give him credit for that Syracuse win. 2 wins last year.
Right? Come on.
Look at Kiev. You mentioned those games after Kansas where you're going to win your first 3. And again, in my college football guide, I just have my schedule with my power ratings playing out the schedule so you visually can see I have them as a dog of 9 points or higher in every other game except the 3 you're going to win. So, yes, the power ratings can change and the team can be better, but you are going to have to pull an upset as a dog of a touchdown or more to get that 4th win.
No, that's true. And it's one of those you can be sitting there stuck at 3, and then you're like towards the end of the year, you're like, come on, man, we'll see what happens. But hopefully Duke will give me some love later. Let's move on to another conference. Pop quiz, you guys, before we pop quiz. And this, which conference in history, Power 5, at least as long as I've looked back, has had their 2nd and 3rd place teams both finish negative in net yards per play for the first time in history?
Pac-12.
No.
It was probably the Big Ten last year because weren't Indiana and Northwestern the 2nd and 3rd place teams?
Bingo. It was the Big Ten. Indiana. It's almost unprecedented to see the 2nd and 3rd best teams in a 14-team conference to finish negative in yards per play. I mean, COVID obviously wrecked it, but the officiating was bad. Lots of opportunities. I'd say Northwestern and Indiana were on a lot of the good side of the flags last year.
And the replay non-reversals.
yeah, the replay non-reversals. And I'll tell you right now, that's very strange. And I hope obviously things get back to normal a little bit. But let's get into the Big Ten here. I'm going to start here. Penn State, I'm going under 9 wins. And it's pretty obvious to me where their losses are. I have a few Penn State members that always that's going to give me more crap even. But at Wisconsin right away. And maybe Penn State gets better and better, and maybe they end up a better team than Wisconsin. But right now they're not. And Wisconsin's great at prepping in the beginning of the year for a team. It's going to be a tough environment at Camp Randall. I mean, they're coming into Camp Randall with a full stadium here, right? Right off the bat, when last year was obviously very ticky-tack, not sure. That's going to hit them like a wall of bricks here. Then their other losses at Ohio State, I can't give them a win for that right now, and at Iowa.
No, you can't give them a win in Columbus.
No, probably not. It would take a lot.
Really going out on the ledge there, aren't you?
I know what had happened like one time. Can't give them a win, but even at Iowa, I can't give them a win at Iowa. I think Iowa's a better team than Penn State. And now you got those 3, right? And then you have 9. But you also have Auburn there, and they're probably going to beat Auburn at home, but that's a questionable game. Indiana, even though I don't like them that much this year, that's still kind of questionable. And then Michigan and even Rutgers is better. Rutgers is better this year. I think 9 is the max for a push. So only 6 returning starters on defense. They lost Jason Owe, and now Adisa Isaac is out for the season. He was the guy that was going to replace Owe in the pass rush. So that's some huge losses. New offensive coordinator again.
Third straight year. I was going to say third straight year for Clifford, new offensive coordinator, and I think that's 5 coordinators now in 8 years for Franklin.
Yep. I think so. Yeah, it's a lot. And so I see under 9. I'll let Ralph go first here.
Well, I'm going to just go on record, Kiev. You and I now have a beer bet on Penn State's win total. So that's not the one I'm going to give out here. And you could send me the check in the mail after we get off the show. I'm going to go Wisconsin over. So I was figuring you would start and you would just go there. You have to take it for what it's worth. You look at their schedule in the Big Ten. You look at what they're returning. Last year they had a 3-3 Big Ten record, but they were plus 95.3 yards per game in conference play. That was number 23 in the country. This year with Mertz, you have one of the conference's best quarterback. The run game is going to be improved where it was. The schedule is what it is. And then when you look at their schedule and you break down, I have Wisconsin favored in every game. And you look at the Notre Dame game, I have them as a 2.5-point favorite. Notre Dame is coming off Florida State, Houston, Toledo, and they have Cincinnati on deck. Wisconsin has a bye before the Notre Dame game. So this is the year of hell for Notre Dame. The ACC set it up where almost every team is off a bye before facing Notre Dame. Wisconsin is another one of those teams. So the schedule plays out to me, besides the Penn State game and the Notre Dame game, which I think they both could win, I have them as a favorite of 7.3 or more. Average game, I have them, again, favorite in every game, minus 13.9. Right now, they're plus 600 to win the Big Ten. Again, I'm not going to bet that because, as you guys said, if it gets to the end of the year, you're looking at the money line. There's not enough value to risk that. But to me, one more thing I'm going to throw out is I look at Maryland and I look at where their game totals were. Maryland is a team that I absolutely have circled with Tua's little brother to be an over team. Their defense was horrendous. I think their offense is greatly improved. They're going to change tempo and go up tempo this year with a more experienced quarterback. I'm looking for them to have scores in the 70s and 80s pretty quick this year.
Well, look at that. Maryland on the over. Is it going to happen? Tagovailoa, brother. That's interesting. That's a good play.
Iavoli?
I don't know if it's going to be a winning play, but
Talia Tagovailoa.
Well, that's good stuff.
Or as I say, Tua's younger brother. I
think that's what everyone's going to say this year. So.
And he's got a couple of stud wide receivers here. Dante Demas Jr. is one hell of a receiver. So you're right, Ralph. They do have a ton of offensive weapons.
Funny enough, Rutgers and Maryland's interesting to me this year. Very interesting on that side. I think that one of them can surprise somebody, like a Penn State or somebody like that. So we'll see, man. But you like my Badgers over 9.5, huh?
Again, last year's rush attack was an anomaly. I'm a big fan of Mertz, and you put that type of quarterback. You can say maybe Penix is the best quarterback, maybe Morgan. Who knows? But he's clearly one of the top quarterbacks. So you give one of the top quarterbacks with a now again improved O-line. Last year they rushed for 165. That's like a pass happy team after rushing for 273 and 233 the years prior. But I'm a big Berger fan. I think he's going to do great. The schedule plays out well. You only have starting with the Penn State game, Eastern Michigan and a bye. And then between Illinois and at Purdue, you have Army, who's going to be a nice win. So the way the schedule plays out, yes, I'm on the Badgers.
All right, I love it, man. That's good stuff. Chris, anything in the Big Ten?
I'm not going to get too fancy here. This is a brain dead bet. I laid the 190 or whatever it was with Ohio State to win the conference. I got like Ohio State to win the national title at about 7-1 or so. They are far and away the most talented team in the Big Ten. They're going to be in the conference championship game. I'm going to play over 8 conference wins at the South Point. They're not going to lose 2 conference games. I mean, maybe they could they be upset? Sure, I guess they could, but Stroud's going to be fine at quarterback. Not only do they have Olave and Garrett Wilson, they've got like 3 other freaks at wide receiver. Trevion Henderson, the freshman running back, is going to be an absolute stud. Defensively, they're going to be better. They walk up the tight end. This offense is going to be scary, scary good. They're going to be in the playoff once again. So I think there is a lot of value with Ohio State just to win the big. Just lay around the 2-1 or whatever it is on the Buckeyes to win the Big Ten championship. Because as we talked about before, they're going to be a much bigger favorite on the money line in the game in Indianapolis, and they're going to be there.
Yeah, well, they do avoid Wisconsin. Not do they avoid Iowa too?
Yes.
Yeah, that's huge for them. Yeah, so I mean, even with
their conference road games are Minnesota, Rutgers, Indiana, and Nebraska.
Yep, even with 2
and Michigan.
Even with the new quarterback, pretty safe for them. Sounds like. Ralph, you're about to say something.
Well, you look and Chris talked about positions. They have the best receivers in football, period. They have probably a top 2 defensive line, bringing in 2 young kids with Sawyer and the kid from the West that they just signed. Mm-hmm. They have a top 5 O-line in the country. So, you're looking at the best O-lines and D-lines. You don't need that quarterback. You just need a game manager. He doesn't have to be as dynamic. On Ohio State's schedule this year, if you play it out, their smallest line, I have them at Indiana -9 points. Everything else is double digits. So how can you argue with Chris's play on the over? This isn't a team that gets upset very often. Yeah, they may throw that one clinker in, but you have the luxury of that one clinker.
And you mentioned Indiana as well. That was the other play that I made. I got Indiana under 8. I don't know if 8s are still out there. 7.5 might still be okay. Kiev hit on it at the start about the negative yard per play differential. It was a great story last year, the season that they had, and upsetting Penn State and knocking off Michigan, knocking off Wisconsin to end some losing streaks and some really down years for those 2 programs. You beat Maryland, who was up and down last year. You beat a bad Michigan State team. This year, you open at Kinnick. You got to go to Ann Arbor. You got to go to Penn State. You're not going to beat Ohio State. You got Cincinnati in the non-conference. You got Minnesota and Purdue as well, who those are 50-50 games, I think. 7-5 is possible, and you take last year out of the equation. Like 7-5 would be fine in Indiana. No Stevie Scott, no Upfiler. Jamar Johnson's gone. Kane Womack left, defensive coordinator, to take the head coaching job at South Alabama. Like if you could find under 8, that's like a max bet. Because they're not going 9-3 to beat you. Maybe you push it 8-4. It's 7.5. I still like it, but under 8 was a big play for me.
Right on. I have Ohio State, the number 3 ranked team in my power ratings. I have Iowa at 11 and Wisconsin at 12. Believe it or not, Ralph, I have Iowa slightly above Wisconsin. The good thing for Wisconsin is they get Iowa at home. So I still haven't favored that game, but interesting stuff there. Let's move on to the next conference then. And I believe it's good old Big 12, should we just say the conference soon to be formerly known as the Big 12? So, I mean, it's going to be interesting watching how this all plays out. There's going to be some bitterness at some of these games. Wow. Well, anyways, we could talk forever about how if it's right or wrong about this. The show's not about that. But if you want to take a shot, feel free. But I'm going to have Ralph start out with the Big 12 to see if you like anything in this conference.
Well, I have Oklahoma as the second best team in the country. So, my power ratings have them where they are. I have Oklahoma as a favorite of 11 or more in every game. They are my number one team based on schedule. The average line for Oklahoma, based on my power ratings, minus 25 points per game. Of course, that's counting Western Carolina, where they're going to be laying 60. But to me, I like over Oklahoma. I am not going to get too fancy. They've proven they know how to win. They've proven they are not afraid to run up the score to make sure you don't get backdoored. And the other team I like, but, this is a team I came out of the football season. I say, wow, I really like this team. And that's TCU. And Gary Patterson's has some of the shine has worn off with a couple mediocre years, but he's back to his most returning starters in a long time, significant returning starters. And the only thing that keeps me from betting TCU as a long shot to win the division is you go to Oklahoma, you go to Iowa State, and you go to Oklahoma State. Well, if the top three teams ahead of you in the division and you're on the road against all three, guess what? Your chances are almost nil that you're going to pull upsets against all three to get there. So I like TCU early. I like them against California week 2. I'll be keeping my eye on them in the other games. But again, no bet in that conference besides the Oklahoma bet, which I made. People tend to think, oh, how can you bet over 11s? Well, how can you bet over 11 and a halves? If your team is that good and they're that much better than the rest of the conference, you can't be afraid to do that.
Ralph, let me ask you a question to follow up on that, on Oklahoma. Are you concerned at all that Oklahoma is being a little bit overrated off of what we last saw from them in that bowl game against Florida, where Florida was very open about the fact that they thought their season ended with the loss in the SEC championship game? So many guys did not play for the Gators in that bowl game, and they were an overtime debacle away from being 1-3 after the Red River game last year. And so, are you concerned at all that Oklahoma might be a little bit overvalued?
Well, I am not, because I do my power ratings not worried about what the public says. So, they're done right after the season, and then I make adjustments. And all you have to do is, I'm going to go back and give a plug to my prior boss, Phil Steele. And when I love his unit rankings on the conference pages. And when you look at Oklahoma, the number one quarterback, the number 2 running back, the number 1 receiver, the number 1 O-line, the number 1 D-line, the number 2 linebacker, the number 1 DB, the number 3 special teams. Those are in the conference. So when each individual unit is almost singularly the best in the conference, and I have what I believe is the conference's best quarterback and probably the best defense they're going to have in a decade, put it together. To me, they're going to make the playoffs. But again, that's sort of saying Penn State's going to lose at Ohio State.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so basically, I don't have a ton in the Big 12. I have Baylor over 5.5 wins. And this, I got to tell you, I like Dave Aranda. I know him a little bit about his Wisconsin defensive coordinator days. He was kind of Jim Leonard's mentor a little bit. And then he goes to LSU. They win a title. Now, it wasn't completely based on defense, but he was still part of that team, making the big stops when they did. Now, Baylor had a brutal schedule last year and some very tough endings. They only won 1 out of the 4 games decided by 7 points or less last year. And I know their schedule starts out facing Texas State, Texas Southern, at Kansas. Okay. So unless Kansas becomes some sort of a superpower overnight, I like 3 wins right there. They play BYU later in the year, who didn't return anybody. And I think they lost their offensive coordinator too. So,
yeah, well, he's at Baylor.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of perfect. They play his old offense coordinator against BYU. That's 4 wins right there. And then they finish at Kansas State and they host Texas Tech. I just see so many wins that they can get above 5. And you know how it is that last game. If you aren't bowl eligible and you play a team like maybe, let's just say Texas, at the end, Texas Tech has like 6 or 7 wins. They're going to lay down a little bit. They're in their bowl game. They can't improve their season. That's what I love about going over 5.5. You look at the end to see what happens, and they're going to try to get to that bowl game.
You have 1 point on Baylor last year. You have to remember, they had their Louisiana Tech game canceled, then that Kansas game canceled. So they started off playing Kansas, then they had to go at West Virginia, at Texas, TCU, at Iowa State. So you're playing teams that played 2 or 3 games, and you're playing your first road game of the season at a very difficult situation.
Right. And it looks like, according to your numbers, and this is from Ralph's guide, you have Baylor as an average minus 2.1 on your games. So there's over 6 right there if you just want to go by the straight average, right, Ralph?
It is, but that is very slighted, Kiev, because they have Texas Southern, which I have them as a 55-point favorite. I only have them as a favorite against Texas State, Kansas, Texas Southern, a 1.5-point favorite against BYU, and a 3-point favorite against Texas Tech at the end of the year.
Okay, so there, that gets you to 5. So they need one upset this year. Oh, fair enough. And Chris, did you anything on the Big 12?
Yeah, 2 conference-only win totals. Kansas under 1 is a free roll. Like, either they're going to win 1 game or they're going to win 0 games. I think it's basically, do they beat Texas Tech at home in the middle of October? That's probably the only game that they can win. They're not going to beat Kansas State. Kansas State has owned that series. They close with West Virginia at home, and I wouldn't expect them to beat the Mountaineers at that point in the year either. So Kansas under 1, Big 12 win, I think, is worth a look. And then Texas under 5 conference wins. Again, this is a team that is, and you can even go under the 8 or 8.5, whatever it is on the season win total as well. They've won 9 regular season games once, I think it is, since 2009. But if you really focus it to the Big 12 games, they have, again, their tougher games are away from home. Obviously, the Red River game in Dallas. Iowa State's away from home. TCU's away from home. Baylor is away from home. West Virginia's away from home. So that's 4. And if you want to include the actual overall win total, Arkansas is away from home. Like, this is a team. It's easy for Sark to call plays and have an offense put up great numbers with Mac Jones, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, all the great players that they have. It's a little bit different at Texas, where it's going to have a completely inexperienced starting quarterback, whether it's Thompson or Hudson Card. Obviously, B.J. Robinson is going to be a great running back, but this is not a Texas team that's going to improve and suddenly change overnight. We kind of heard the same things when they hired Tom Herman, when they hired Charlie Strong. Like, this is what Texas is, and I think 5-3 is probably, or 5-4 rather, I should say, is kind of the best case scenario for the Longhorns in the Big 12.
You know, Chris, that Kansas play and the logic behind it, to me, is the best bet I've heard on the pod so far. I mean,
thank you.
I'm looking at my schedule, and a lot of people don't look at the Big 12 conference totals because, again, Chris just put them out at the South Point. But I have them a 15.8 point dog against Kansas State at home. That's the lowest number. So every game they're going to be a dog of 16 or more. And
yeah, so Texas Tech you have Texas Tech as a bigger favorite against Kansas. Wow,
I do have Texas Tech a little higher than most teams, but yeah, I mean, if that 1 is still there, I will be logging on right after this show and jumping on your bandwagon there.
Everybody run to the window to grab poor Kansas under 1 conference games. Great stuff. And you, in that Texas, you kind of winked at one of my play at the end with talking about Texas there, Chris. So all
right. Well, yeah, there's a little teaser for you.
Little teaser for you. Let's move on to Conference USA, guys. And I got to tell you, Ralph, when I was doing my research back in May, I thought I was cool. I mean, I thought I was cutting edge, contrarian, you know. I'm looking at, the UTSA. Oh, Sincere McCormick. Look at these guys. I bet you I'm going to get double digits to 1 to win. And then by the time the number is actually coming out, everybody and their freaking mom is on UTSA. And their number is like plus 300, plus 350. I mean, I was heartbroken to see that. And I kind of, well, guess I'm not playing these guys. Now I'd almost rather play UAB or or Marshall. But That's not going to be my play. And because of that, I didn't take a future, but I will take UTEP over 3 wins. And I think this is the year for Dana Dimmel. This team, they return a ton of production on offense. Their quarterback and best receivers, 5 out of their top 6 tacklers on defense, right? And UTEP's been a terrible team, and we know that. But all their conference games last year were away, except for the very last one. They were all away. And they were still able to squander 3 wins somehow in last year's shorter season. But this year, they have some pretty easy games. At New Mexico State, who didn't even play last year, and I would bet that they're worse than most FCS teams. New Mexico State, I think they're my lowest power rated team. New Mexico State, really competing with UMass there, and Bethune-Cookman is one of their games as well. Home against New Mexico, which might be a loss, but it's at home, and then Old Dominion, which I have worse than UTEP. So there's your wins right there to get 3 at least, maybe if you beat New Mexico. But later, you're at North Texas, home versus Rice, and I'm not high on Rice this team. I think UTEP can get 5 or 6 wins finally, guys. So I'll start out with you, Chris.
This is a league that I didn't have really a ton of strong opinions on. I think the one that I had was FAU. I liked FAU plus the 25 or 25.5 week 1 versus Florida, with the Gators really having all of those the turnovers at the quarterback and skill position players. FAU obviously brought in some quarterbacks to help solve their problem, because offensively they really struggled last year. So N'Kosi Perry, Miami's former quarterback, is there. Brought in another transfer quarterback. And Mike Stoops now is their defensive coordinator. And he's got a lot of personnel to work with. This is a team that was 10th in the country last year in scoring defense. So I think if you're looking for someone opposite the common teams that you're talking about to win this league, they get Marshall at home. And that's a big deal, obviously, being in the same division as Marshall in Conference USA. So I think FAU is certainly a team to watch out for there, and potentially win this league and maybe reach that conference championship game.
All right, look at that. FAU with Taggart there. That is going to be an interesting situation. Let's move into Ralph. Any thoughts on the Conference USA?
Yeah, well, I'm going to just concur what Chris said. I have FAU. UTSA, UAB, and Marshall are all at plus 300 to win the conference. That's where, as of this morning, from one book. Western Kentucky was plus 850, and Florida Atlantic's plus 12. I think there's a lot of bunches grouped. Obviously, UAB to me is the strongest team in the group. They have some excitement with their new stadium. This is a conference I didn't make any bets on, but I do want to bring up a point just to help educate some of our viewers, not that they need much help educating from us. It's, we're learning in basketball now in college hoops, number of returning starters means so little with the transfer portal. Well, it's becoming the same way. Western Kentucky, you look at Western Kentucky and say they only have 10 returning starters. How can they repeat? Well, this team went out to Houston Baptist, who had one of the strongest offenses in FBS last year, took their OC, their quarterback, and their top 3 wide receivers, who 2 of them were all conference players, and the quarterback has thrown for over 10,000 yards. So, there has to be a new category moving forward in college football, returning starters and transfers that started with significant stats at other schools. So Western Kentucky is a team that some may say, why are they rated as high as they are? And that's part of the reason.
You hit it. That's the extra dive you got to take. When just looking at returning production, returning starters, if you're getting a bunch of transfers in, that's what's going to give you the edge right now. So I agree with you 100%. Great way to look at it. And so that's all I have really. I don't have any other great thoughts about Conference USA, just because the team I prep with wasn't the one that had the good number. But let's move on to the MAC then, guys. Now, the MAC for me in general has a lot of teams that are pretty good. And when you talk about return in production, Ralph, there's a ton of it in the MAC. So I'm going to let you start first and see if you need like anything in this conference.
Well, you look at the team that had the best yards per game diff in the MAC West last year was Toledo at plus 123 games, and Toledo returns 22 starters. So that's a pretty good number. Returning all 22 players that were the number one team in the West. To me, though, there's no value. A couple injuries there at plus 200, they're plus 210. I made no over-under bets. I like Central Michigan, but I didn't pull the trigger on that. But I'm going to take a flyer and bet Kent State at plus 11-1 to win the MAC. So they're a second-ranked team for me, but with a quality quarterback in Crum and a team that learned how to play at that super up-tempo pace that they played last year. And yes, teams are going to be more conditioned than they were last year with the COVID situation, but I think they'll have a big edge. The only concern about Kent State, you have that lightning flash offense and you run into some bad weather in some late games, it can slow you down.
So Kent State from a futures perspective or season?
Kent State to win MAC at 11-1.
Great stuff. And real quick, I have Kent State as well, and I'm splitting it with another team though. So not big. I'm not making big plays, like maybe a half quarter unit type thing, but I got Kent State to win the MAC at plus 1,400. I mean, how do you not like Sean Lewis and what he's done there? Ex-Badger, by the way, used to play tight end and quarterback for the Wisconsin Badgers back in the early 2000s. Wanted to point that out. But this team averaged 49.5 points per game last year. That was absolutely ridiculous. Now, the caveat to what they did last year, guys, is 2 of their games was against Akron and Bowling Green. Their other game was Buffalo. But they at least put a 40 spot on Buffalo. And Buffalo was known for their defense, and they were kind of able to run with them for a while after a couple hiccups. But this is how teams grow. The defense was terrible, but they have 5 transfers that are coming in. You're talking about transfers, 5 transfers that are coming in to help in right away. Some from some decent named schools there. So I like how they're not on the same side as Ball State, Toledo, and Western Michigan, right? They're away from them, and they get Buffalo at home this year. So I did put a half star or so on them at plus 1,400 is where I found it, and I'm taking Western Michigan with the other half. And the reason that is I like Caleb Ellaby. I like how he ran for 4 TDs, threw 18 touchdowns, and had only 2 interceptions last year. Third in passing efficiency behind guys like Mac Jones, and I can't remember the other one that was really high in pass efficiency last year, but he was third, in all of college football. The team barely lost to Ball State last year by 3 points. The defense does have to vastly improve, I will say. So I'm splitting my play here. Chris, any thoughts?
There were a couple of things I gravitated towards the MAC. I threw a little bit of a dart on Eastern Michigan to win the MAC at I think around 25-1 or so. Again, this is a team that all they have done lately is play close games. They had a lot of COVID problems last year and a lot of injuries. And they get the quarterback Hutchinson back. Creighton's got basically his entire defense back. I think they feel good about some of the running backs that they have last year. Nearly beat Ball State, nearly beat Kent State. I mean, they're right there with these teams. And the good thing for them is they get 2 of the worst teams in the league, Northern Illinois and Bowling Green, on the road in games that they should win. So while they may not go on the road and beat, they can put themselves in a position to maybe be in the race to get into that MAC championship game. So again, I got a quarter unit or a half unit on them to win the MAC. I thought was worthwhile. The one thing that I really did like in the MAC was, again, conference wins and season wins on Northern Illinois. Under 2 conference wins and under 3.5 season wins. Like Northern Illinois, they get Bowling Green at home, but who else are they going to beat in the MAC? Maybe they beat Eastern Michigan, but they're not going to win in Toledo. They're not going to win at Kent State. They're not going to win in Central Michigan. They're not going to beat Ball State. They're not going to beat Western Michigan. They're not going to go to Buffalo and win. Like 2 is like the worst, like a push. That's the best case scenario, I think, for Northern Illinois, are 2 wins. And then I think you could even include that to the regular season win total too, because they're not going to go to Georgia Tech and win. Wyoming is better than them, and the Cowboys will be favored I would think, in DeKalb. They're not going to go to Michigan and win. And yeah, they'll probably beat Maine, who isn't a bad FCS team, but that team wins 4 games overall and wins 3 games in the MAC to beat me. So be it. Some bets you just have to make, and that's one of them for me.
I like it. I'm down on Northern Illinois as well. So I'm going to take another look at that one. Really killing these unders, man, with these poor, unfortunate teams, Chris. Holy cow.
Hey, well, that unfortunately is kind of an overall theme in college football right now, where you have the haves and the have-nots. You've got the elite teams are always going to be there, and these teams at the bottom that really have, I don't want to say no hope or zero hope, but it's going to be a while before they can kind of build things back up until they figure it out.
You know, Kiev, that really is the difference between sharps and squares. When you're looking at the 10 and a halves and 11s and 11 and a halves, most of the public won't bet them overs. When you're looking at the 1s, 1 and a halves and 2s, most people don't want to bet those unders. So there's really more value built into those because they know how much money they're going to get from public betting over 1 easy money compared to what the sharps are going to take with the extremes on both ends of the win totals.
Oh, I had Bowling Green under last year. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I love some of these plays, and it's just fun to say. And it's also fun when alumni come back at us and tweet at us because of it. So we'll see if we get any of that this year. Let's move on to the mountain.
I had a Central Michigan radio announcer tweet at me when I picked Kansas to beat them a couple of years ago on the road. And they did. He tweeted at me before the game when I made the pick on the board, and it was like Mr. Tough Guy. And then Kansas obviously went up there and ended that 40-something game losing streak or whatever it was, and it was like crickets after that. So I took the high road and didn't tweet back at him. But it's so funny when like you say, like who watches, who listens, who reads. What you never know where it's going to come from.
Awesome. I love hearing those stories, and that's one thing I love about college football more than anything. The fandom is absolutely insane, and it's always going to be my favorite just because of that. Let's move on to the Mountain West Conference then. Air Force, I'm going under 6.5 wins. I liked it more before, but here's the thing. They only return really 4 starters on offense, and they have a completely brand new offensive line. When it's an option team and that kind of thing happens, it really, really takes them a while to gel. I see a lot of fumbles, missed blocks, just their plays get blown up. One thing I will say is they've also been passing a little bit more. I wonder if they're going to try that with a new offensive line as well. But they have a pretty tough schedule at 6.5 wins. I'm going to move down to another future play that I made. I'm splitting again. That's the whole theme about my future plays. If you can get bigger prices, you can go split your unit in half and go on each side, because if you need to hedge back, you just need a little bit more to make up for. I'm going to go San Jose State to win the conference at plus 550. I don't know why. And I actually went 1 star on that and half star on the other. I am not sure why that their odds are so good on that.
I like this play.
Thank you. They rank 4th in the conference according to in returning production. They return a ton of people. Quarterback Nick Starkel. Their full offensive line. Their whole defense is practically back. They have to go to Nevada, but they avoid Boise State. You know, they
avoid Boise State, San Diego State, and Fresno. Yeah, they got to replace a couple of receivers. And like I said, I think that's a great price. And the other thing, too, is I'm sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. They get San Diego State, Fresno, and Wyoming at home and miss Boise. Yeah. And a lot of people like Nevada on that side. Yeah, San Jose State has to go to Nevada, but Nevada on the flip side has to go to Boise, San Diego State, and Fresno. So I think there are more opportunities there to lose for Nevada than there are for San Jose State. I like this play a lot. For them to potentially repeat the Mountain West.
Thank you, and it competes with your Kansas play, right? Well, we'll see about that. But I
like Kansas better.
Lance Leopold, baby. Well, we'll see what happens with them, but I agree with everything, just how you put it. I mean, getting San Diego State and Fresno State at home, and then it's harder for Nevada just to get San Jose State at home, go to San Diego State, Fresno, and Boise State. So that's the thinking on that. That's the exact way to look at it. And for the other part of it, I'm going to go a 0.5 star on the Hawaii. They're going to win 20-1. It's a great number. It's kind of my backup plan. Todd Graham, underrated coach in my opinion. Schedule sets up nicely because they also avoid Boise State and they get San Jose State, Fresno State, and San Diego State at home themselves. So the 20-1, too hard for me to not sprinkle a little bit smaller of a play on it. Very easy to make up for if you got your San Jose State here in the championship game anyway. And I like the fact that Hawaii's added some big name transfers from Oklahoma, Baylor, and Utah to their defense. So this is kind of a team I looked at the transfers. Ralph, what do you have?
Well, you and I won't be watching football together on October 15th. So I am taking San Diego State at 11-1 to win. And you talked about you don't know why the San Jose line is so high. You have the number one team from last year in the Mountain West. Yeah, San Jose was plus 104.8 yards per game in the Mountain West. That was number 17 in the country. San Diego State was actually plus 106.6, number 14. You have 17 returning starters back from the team that was number one. And because they were 4-2, they're not getting the love that a San Jose State team did at 7-0. But to me, again, you have Boise at home. You have Nevada at home. You don't have Wyoming, who I have as the third best team. So I have San Diego State plus 1100, and something I'd never thought I'd say since I've been doing college football. I'm going to take over on New Mexico. It was 4.5. It's now 4.5. That must be
an anti-Bob Davie play right there.
Well, yeah. Finally, they have a coach. I'm not going to be that mean and say that. Oh, I did say that. Bob Davie kept trying to reinvent the wheel with what he had there. But I think this New Mexico team is on the way up. When I look at my schedule, they have the 5 winnable games that I need to get there. Houston Baptist, again, we talked about Houston Baptist and all their players on the OC just going to Western Kentucky. New Mexico State, they're going to be a 17-point favorite. I mean, New Mexico State's getting 8.5 against UTEP week 1. At UTEP, I have them as a favorite. At UNLV, they get UNLV after a bye at home. So 4 very winnable games, and then they finish with Utah State at home. So I'm not asking this team to go on the road and win games, which you have to be very careful when you're using those young few win totals, especially a team that has only won 4 games and lost 14 the last 2 years. But New Mexico over and San Diego State to win the Mountain West.
I think the other team that you mentioned there is interesting, and they're a team I'd be looking to potentially play over their season win total as well, and maybe throw a little bit on to win the conference is Wyoming. If Chambers can stay healthy at quarterback, this team has a chance because the defense under Craig Bowl is going to be good every year. I think at running back they're going to be okay. With Valladay, he's an impact player that they have. It's one of the better home field advantages in the conference. I know they have a little bit of turnover on the coaching staff, but I think, and if you look at the non-conference games early in the year, you could assume that they're going to be healthy early in the year. There's a chance they win all 4 of those games. I mean, going to Northern Illinois, we hit on them before. They go to UConn, and UConn's certainly not a very good team. But getting Ball State at home is huge. They could beat Ball State and Laramie, and then they have FCS Montana State. So they could be entering the month of October. They're 4-0, and you only need a couple more wins to pick up that season over. So I think Wyoming, you're right. They are a team that found themselves in a ton of close, ugly games last year where their offense struggled simply because they had no experience at all at quarterback ready to play.
One note on Wyoming, last year they didn't play Air Force, so those kids are 2 removed from playing the option, 2 years removed, and they do get a bye before Air Force, which is always a coach's benefit to prep for that option.
All right. Well, look at that. And Wyoming had some very bad injury luck last year. People were looking at them to be good. Their quarterback got hurt for only a season. I'm pretty sure.
I think like the third straight year. I think he got hurt for the season.
Thank God. Well, that's got to turn around at some point. So I love the action in this conference. We have a lot of different opinions here. I mean, all these different little futures here. All of a sudden, Boise State's probably just going to clear our clocks. But
I don't know why they're such a big favorite.
Their name. They lost Harrison.
Yeah.
They lost Harrison. They lost their.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a big deal. I think Avalos will be fine, but I mean, yeah, they're the model of consistency in this league. But I think teams like San Jose State, San Diego State, Wyoming, I think they've all kind of closed the gap a little bit here.
Absolutely, I do too. It's going to be such a fun conference to watch, and we're definitely going to revisit this podcast here to see what happens. Let's move on to the Pac-12 here, and I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I got nothing in this whole conference.
Really? Okay.
I know where you're going to go just because I listened to the Bear and Stanford Steve, of course, and that's cool. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I do like Charlie Brewer at Utah. What I don't like is the numbers all the way down to 4-1. I like 4 teams in the South a lot. I like ASU. I like UCLA, and they're probably the price one. The quarterback there, Robinson. I like, obviously, what I was just talking about, Utah. Charlie Brewer is fantastic. He almost beat Oklahoma against Kyler Murray's Oklahoma. With Baylor,
yes.
Championship, almost beat Oklahoma. I was trying to say, I'm stuttering here. And then USC's USC. So there's 4 teams there that are just so stacked. It's hard for me to take a low number on any of these, but it's going to be one of those. And then you got Oregon on top, pretty favorable.
You didn't even mention UCLA.
I did. Yeah, I did mention. I did.
Oh, you did mention UCLA. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yep, I said that they are the price one, and so they're probably
gotcha.
they're 10-1. But that's I was hoping for something bigger. Sorry, I'm passing.
Maybe to win the South, you could play them. Yeah.
I didn't see a lot of those numbers up. I'm gonna have to shop that around, and I want more outs. So I'm gonna get more outs when I'm in Nevada next week. So I'm gonna shop that around. Why don't you start out and tell us how you love Oregon, Chris?
Well, no, I think that they might have the best roster by anybody that they're going to play in the regular season. Their season win total was 9. And like 9-3 is probably the worst case scenario for the Ducks. I know people are talking about Tyler Shuck leaving and not being there, but he kind of stunk at the end of the year last year. Dirty little secret in the big the Pac-12 championship game, and then not really finishing the bowl game. Even if they lose, Ty Thompson's played great so far in fall camp, and I think there's a chance he maybe wins that job over Anthony Brown, or at least maybe after the Ohio State game, Thompson does take over. We'll see. But Joe Moore has all of his toys back. He's got an offensive line that's basically back intact. All the wide receivers are back. C.J. Verdell is back at running back. The defense could be scary, scary good with Noah Sewell and Kayvon Thibodeau on that defensive side of the ball. Look, maybe if they lose to Ohio State, fine, that's expected. But are they going to lose at Utah, at Seattle, UW, and lose another game? Remember, they don't play USC or Arizona State from the South. Is there a chance they go 8-4? I don't think there's a chance in hell that they go 8-4. I think 9-3 is a worst case scenario, and I think more than likely Oregon is 10-2 in the regular season. So I like the Ducks over 9 for the season.
So, you're talking me into it. I don't see them losing at Washington. I think that Washington isn't the Washington Huskies of before. I do see them losing at Utah, but that could be a win too. It's not going to be a big spread there.
Sure.
It could be pick 'em even. So, interesting. Ralph, any thoughts?
Well, I am on Utah. I went one step further than you. You pulled the trigger, but I got 7-1, and I looked this morning, and it was still 6-1. So your 4-1 is a very light number with 6-1s to be found. You mentioned Charlie Brewer, 39 starts at Baylor, almost 10,000 yards. You're talking about a team with 19 returning starters. Kyle Whittingham is probably the one coach. Maybe he and Pat Fitzgerald are the coaches that always beat my impression of the team at the beginning of the year. When I take my win totals and I write them down for each team at the beginning of the year, and it always seems that Kyle Whittingham impresses me. And while they have to go to USC, and a lot of people take that into the final consideration of who you like in the South, or you a USC or Utah fan, while they have to go to USC, they actually have a bye the week before, while UCLA is playing their 6th straight game and 5th straight Pac-12 game. Utah's going to be playing their 2nd Pac-12 game. USC is going to be playing their 5th straight Pac-12 game. So I think Utah wins that. I think Utah gets to the Pac-12 title, and then I'll worry about hedging out. But I did bet him at 6-1, and I bet him over 8.5 wins.
Do you guys see lines on just the South yet? Because I'm curious what Utah is on just winning the Pac-12 South.
I think like they're plus 250 or so to win the South.
Okay,
I think is what I had heard.
That's just as valuable. I mean, I'm going to guess Oregon would be minus 200 at the most, and you're sacrificing that to get out of your 6-1. Plus 250 is not bad to end off there. You know,
I have worries about Utah. Again, maybe it's because a couple of years ago I was kind of touting them to make the college football playoff if they were to win the Pac-12 over Oklahoma, and then they went out and laid an absolute egg on the big stage in that Pac-12 championship game on Friday night, looked terrible, and then played an average Texas team in a bowl game. You would have thought that Utah would want to erase that memory, beat a team like Texas in a bowl game, and finish up the season strong. They were awful, even worse in that game. I just have like I said, maybe it's a personal thing because I was burned by them pretty badly a couple of years back, but I got a hard time getting there with Utah.
Well, I'll tell you what, and that's why I like the Charlie Brewer, because he was in that championship game and barely lost. Now he's coming to a potential another championship game, and I think that's the one. The experience of being in one is going to take him over the edge. So that's kind of where I would argue with that.
Kiev, your numbers for the South: USC plus 180, Utah plus 230. Arizona State plus 240, and UCLA plus 600.
Okay, cool. No, thank you. UCLA is not bad look in that one either. So I made some money.
And they're going to be good on offense this year. Dulcich is one of the best tight ends out there, and Zach Charbonnet transferred in from Michigan is going to have a big season, I think, for the Bruins. One of the other things that I looked at in this league too was playing USC under 7 Pac-12 wins. I can't see them going 8-1. This based on the schedule. This number actually got bet up from 6.5 to 7 at South Point, but it's a team that always seems to fall short of expectations. Look at all the games that they probably should have lost. Arizona State, UCLA, they should have lost for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Got very, very fortunate and won some games that they shouldn't have.
Against Arizona last year, that was tough. Their first game
Arizona was the worst team in the conference by a lot.
I know.
And you go to Cal, you go to Arizona State. You still got UCLA as well on the schedule. You got Stanford on the schedule early in the year when you don't know what you're going to make out of David Shaw's team. You got to go to Wazoo, but I'm not super high on them. But they're not going to go 8-1 and beat me. So I mean, if I push on 7-2, that's fine. But I think 6-3 is very much in play for a Pac-12 record for USC.
Well, you don't got to tell me twice to fade Clay Hilton, so not a tough decision on that one, my man. But we can talk about this conference a long time. What's really kept me off is ASU sitting there as well. But I'm going to go shop around for some numbers here before we get to the SEC. This segment is sponsored by BetUS.com. Make sure you check them out. Use the promo code BetterOdds to get a 100% sign-up bonus. Let's move into the SEC then, guys. And I'll start out here. I'm going to take Auburn under the 7 wins, and I did lay minus 150 on this, and maybe the number was better earlier. I was a sucker for Auburn before, and I was wrong, and I watched a lot of their games, and I saw why I was wrong. I mean, Bo Nix is pretty good at home, but he's just a terrible road quarterback here. I don't like the fact that they have a new coach. And I know it's Brian Harsin. He's been successful at Boise State, but this is one end of the country going to the other. You know, the schools don't know you as a recruiter there, you know. Lots of difference there. And I didn't even like him that much at Boise State, to be honest with you. I thought that program, was at the top and then slightly went down because of him or with him. Not necessarily because of him, but he was there. I don't like their schedule. I see losses at Penn State, at LSU, against Georgia, at Texas A&M, and of course Alabama, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you also have tough games at Ole Miss and against Mississippi State. There's not a lot of room for error here, and so that's why I'm paying the juice at the -100, -150. Bo Nix hasn't showed me he can move it to the next level, and he's not going to do it with a new coach, guys. What are your thoughts, Chris?
No, I agree. It's going to be an interesting dynamic on that team to see how they kind of evolve offensively. Bo Nix is not a difference maker in a positive way, I think, on the offensive side of the football. But defensively, they got a couple of good linebackers. And I think defensively they're going to be, with Derek Mason there, I think they'll be competitive. But it's a weird fit with Harsin, and I'm curious to see how that goes. There were quite a few conference win totals that I did like in here. Florida under 5.5. You're not going to beat Georgia. You're not going to beat Alabama. And I'm going to assume that you're going to lose one game amongst three at LSU, at Missouri, and at Kentucky with all the roster turnover that you have this year and some of the games you were fortunate to win last year. So I think 6-3 is very unlikely for the Gators in the SEC. I think or 6-2 rather. I think 5-3 is more likely. Vanderbilt is 1.5. Like, who are they beating? The winner at South Carolina and Tennessee are on the road. Like they're not going to win either of those games. I wouldn't think. Georgia, their conference win total 7. Don't face LSU. Don't face A&M. Don't face Bama. Now I know that they got some injuries today with Darnell Washington and defensive back, but you would think for the meat of the SEC schedule, those guys will be back. I mean, maybe they lose one game, maybe they get upset, but they're not going to go 6-2 in the SEC. And then Tennessee, I like their season win total under to begin with. This is a team where I think they take a negative step back at the head coach with Josh Heupel coming in there. They lost 1 million guys in the transfer portal. Well, I think it was like 7 starters, like 11 guys on the 2 deep, including some of their better defensive players. The Pitt non-conference game at home is not a gimme at all, and you need gimme. When you're a mediocre team, you need gimme non-conference games to go over on win totals. You're not going to win any of your 4 SEC road games, and you're certainly not allowed to beat South Carolina or Ole Miss at home. I think 6-6 is the best case scenario, but I think 5-7 is more likely. But so yeah, a lot of thoughts here on the SEC.
Yeah, and you should. Yeah, the SEC's been the power conference of all of college football, and College Game Day always at one of those locations. SEC is the best conference, obviously, with Alabama there, and Georgia best recruiting around. Ralph, any thoughts on the SEC?
Yeah, my top over under is Tennessee under 6. So Chris basically broke it down. You know, you have 2 winnable games, and you're going to beat Bowling Green. You're going to beat Tennessee Tech early. You're going to beat South Alabama, and you're likely going to beat Vanderbilt late. And that's 4. And then the rest is in between. I guess South Carolina would be the biggest push for me. Chris, you were talking Georgia. You bet over Georgia, correct?
Yeah, Georgia over 7, yes.
Okay, at the end, I thought you said you can't see them getting that wins. Maybe I just misheard you, but it was.
I'm sorry. I think I might have spoke too fast. I don't think I could see Georgia losing twice in the SEC. I think is what I
totally
meant to say.
I have them as a 7-point favorite Auburn, a 5.5-point favorite to Florida. I have Georgia over as well. And while I didn't bet Georgia to win, because they're only plus 190 now to win the SEC, and you know they're going to be that on the money line against Alabama anyway. I did think there was value with Chase Daniels as the Heisman winner. You know, I got him back at 18. He opened like 25. I bet him at 18. He's down to 12 or 14 in some places. But if you are a big Georgia fan and you think they are going to do well and get there, then just throw a few shekels on Chase Daniels for a Heisman.
Yeah. Your thought with JT Daniels there, a lot what I was thinking with Sam Howell in North Carolina in the ACC, trying to create a little additional value, thinking that if Georgia does go undefeated or 12-1 and they beat Alabama in the SEC championship game, he's going to win. So yeah, you and I, JT Daniels and Sam Howell are both thinking along the same lines there.
And people may ask about Coral, the best quarterback you have a passing offense with the best quarterback, but why would you play JT Daniels instead? Well, number one, we know it has to be a winning program to win the Heisman. And number two, the top 4 DBs, the top 4 secondaries in the SEC, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, and Texas A&M. Mississippi plays all 4. Georgia doesn't play any of them, one of them being themselves. So they are missing all those elite defenses.
I love how everything correlates together because Florida down year, you're taking their under in the conference. Georgia, great year. You play the over. I mean, both very likely to happen. Georgia's going to beat them. But even if something happens like a massive hiccup and maybe Florida's a little bit better, you can still get one of those. So it's not like it's all or nothing. You're almost splitting up your risk by doing it that way when you correlate things together the way you did. So fantastic job, guys, on discussing that. I have a question for Chris here, and it's going to involve a future play because I'm thinking I'm the only one doing this in this conference here. What would it take? What would it take for anybody to not take Alabama out of the West to win the full SEC? What would have to, I suppose, check the boxes? What are the boxes, Chris?
I can't. They're really. I can't take LSU. I am down on LSU. I think the quarterback position. They're trying to catch lightning in a bottle by bringing in some of like that Joe Brady tree to kind of be the offensive side of the ball. But I think they got issues at quarterback. Not a lot of experience there. For all the talk, and Ralph was talking about how great their secondary is. They were torched last year in the passing game. For all the talk about how Stingley could be this two-way guy and maybe be a Heisman guy, they were atrocious versus the pass last year. Now, I know Pelini is gone, and they brought in a new coordinator, but I have concerns about which way LSU is going. And A&M, A&M's the obvious choice, but wouldn't you just rather play them on the money line at home when they're going to be about an 11-point dog against? Because they have to beat Alabama at home in order to get to the SEC championship game. So, aren't they going to be a better price than the money line at home again?
You can play them both. Come on, man. So here's what I'm getting at, and
the other thing is for me is A&M in these games historically they don't win these big ranked matchups. Top 10 A&M versus a top 10 team. They don't win these games. I want to see who the A&M quarterback is going to be. I think defensively they're going to be really good. I think Spiller is obviously a really good running back. I think they got pieces at wide receiver, turnover on the offensive line, but they should be okay there. Quarterback, I think, is a big problem, or I shouldn't say a big problem, but a big question. And just the track record of A&M, how they have not won these games, that would lead me to pause, and which is why I would not play them to win the SEC right now. But if the quarterback turns out to be okay early in the year, maybe you take a shot on the money line against Alabama. You take the points at Kyle Field in October when they play.
Great points, but the box is that, and you're never going to get Nick Saban leaving this job. So that box is that's never going to be checked. I mean, that's the best job in all of sports. I don't care what anybody says. If he leaves that, man, somebody should check him into an old folks home. There's no way in anybody's right mind that you would leave that job. But what you did get was a change in quarterback. And I know you're getting that with A&M too, but Haynes King, I think, is going to be the quarterback there. And you got a fantastic guy with Bryce Young in Alabama, but it's still a change. You're checking the quarterback box. The other box that we're checking is I haven't seen Alabama's offense be as good as it has been the last couple of years. You're losing Steve Sarkisian, and guess who you're getting to replace Steve Sarkisian? Bill O'Brien from the
who was a pretty darn good play caller in college, by the way.
Yeah, maybe he was back in the day. But a lot of things have changed, and that's the other box I'm checking. And I'm not saying that this is a smart bet, but I can see this happening 1 out of 5 times that Alabama isn't the one representing the team. Unfortunately, Alabama doesn't play Georgia this year, and I really wish that they did. It would make it a little easier for me. But I'm getting 11-1 on Texas A&M to win, and they get Alabama at home. I like how Jimbo Fisher was a championship coach. He's won a championship. You know, that checks that box too. I like how the recruiting of 2018, 2019, 2020 averages at 9 on 247, ninth in the nation for that. I love their schedule because they do avoid Georgia and Florida. I mean, remember how A&M had the worst schedules over the past 3 years, having to play Clemson? They don't play Clemson. They finally have a cake non-conference schedule, and they avoid Florida and Georgia, which is huge. This could be a very healthy team coming in to that Alabama game. And heck, there's going to be a loud crowd over there. They win this game, I think they're representing. But the other side of this coin, as you know, I've been playing two sides this year. I like Matt Corral, man. I like Ole Miss, and I like Matt Corral's price for Heisman. I like how he had 29 touchdowns last year. I like how he had a 71% completion percentage in Lane Kiffin's first year of his offense. I like how they beat Indiana in their bowl game. They did run with Alabama, and I know Alabama's defense wasn't ready, but they did win 4 of their 5 last games. The Lane train, man, that coach, very, 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 very.
Yeah, he is, but like Ralph was saying, though, the problem is they're going to be 7-5 or somewhere in that range. This is not going to be a 10-2 type of team that's going to put him into the Heisman discussion. His numbers, Corral's numbers are going to be great, but like Ralph was saying, they're just not going to be a top 5, a top 10 type team where Heisman voters are going to gravitate towards him.
All right, well, I'll tell you this: if he's completing 71% again or better, we'll see what happens. I know they did lose Elijah Moore, but they do return still a lot of playmakers there, and they do need a defense. I will give you that. But I don't know if they're just winning 7 games because they also avoid Florida and they avoid Georgia from the other side. So 40 to 1. I got them 40 to 1, which you'd have to hedge that out of Georgia. So a little bit on them at 40 to 1, a little bit on the more prominent one. A&M at 11 to 1 is kind of what I'm looking. But trust me, betting against Alabama is something that is not going to make you rich. I had to check 2 boxes to do it. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. Let's move into the Sun Belt then. The final conference we have to talk about. Real quick, we're running short on time. I want to give our best bets out. I'm going to say that Georgia State's going to win over 5.5 games. I really like Cornelius.
Yes.
All right. Some agreement already.
I took a flyer on them at 25 to 1. I think it was to win the league. I mean, the schedule, they nearly beat Louisiana last year. They nearly beat Appalachian State last year. They did get blown out by Coastal, but they got a bunch of guys, as a lot of teams do, coming back. This is a team that I think is definitely worth a flyer to win this league.
Man, and I was going to do that, and I looked, and they have to go at Louisiana, at Coastal Carolina. They do get App State at home at least. But, man, can Coastal Carolina repeat that? I don't know. They do return a ton of production themselves and their coach.
You do lose Maribel and Tyrion Jackson, their best defensive players. So I'll be curious to see.
Yeah, very curious to see. I love what you're thinking there. So over 5.5 wins, Georgia State for sure. And
yeah,
I like it. And they have a nice finish to the season. They're going to get bowling because they're going to have Georgia Southern and Western Kentucky. I think that easy over 5.5 wins, but I really like your thoughts on the possible 25 to 1 reach. I might be a player with you on that. Ralph, anything?
Hey, Chris and Kiev, this morning when I printed off lines, Georgia State was 40 to 1 to win the Sun Belt.
Okay.
Well, I saw 25 to 1 on I think it was DraftKings earlier today. So I have not made that bet yet.
That was at FanDuel, but and part of that reason I think is we've seen the ULL and Coastal lines inflate since they were in the top 25. I think that's a complete negative. I think the kids are going to be full of themselves. I think they go from Coastal Carolina being the hunter to now being the hunted. The only bet I made is I bet Appalachian State plus 5 to 1 to win. You're talking about an experienced team that I have as good as the other two, just a notch behind. Me getting them 5 to 1, and I think those two teams above them are going to have some issues with kids' heads getting too big. This isn't Alabama that's used to being there. These are kids that the Sun Belt historically now has 2 AP top 25 teams. I think that goes a long way to bringing them back to earth.
Oh, yeah. And I think to follow up on that, Ralph, as good as Louisiana was last year, and they had 7 one-possession games.
Yeah, they were
and
6-1 in one possession game.
And I mean and I think Levi Lewis is still so inconsistent throwing the ball. Like I don't know. I probably would be. I could see myself very easily being on Texas week one. I think that number is going to come down a little bit. I think I think ULA is going to be or Louisiana, I should say, going to be a very trendy, popular dog week one. So I could see myself being on Texas that week for sure. But the best bet that I like in the Sun Belt is UL Monroe under 1.5. I know a lot of people. I think this team is going to be better, and I honestly don't know why. The Terry Bowden hire was really weird. I think Rich Rod's son, Rhett, is going to be the quarterback. Last year, they had one game that was decided by fewer than 18 points. You got a bunch of freshmen and sophomore starters. Like, even if they do get some help in the portal, maybe they beat Jackson State. But I just don't know who in this conference they're going to be able to compete with right now.
You know, that you should be a guillotine operator for the next Game of Thrones. You know, taking under 1.5 on poor Louisiana Monroe. There you go. Have to finish with that, didn't you? Oh my God!
I have them October 23rd, Chris. I have them as a 6-point home dog to South Alabama. That's the only other single-digit line behind Jackson State. So you may have to find out October 23rd.
Thank you.
Well, great stuff, guys. We destroy these conferences, and hopefully one of our bigger shots are going to win. Chris, we're always in this at the end of the season with somebody like you said that we're trying to edge out of. Let's hope the plus money's on the other side next time.
Last year we had the Cyclones. 2 years ago we had Buffalo, who blew a double-digit second-half lead. Who will it be this year?
So, a couple things. Let's get to our best bet. But apparently you are against me because you might like the Texas side here.
You're going to be in Louisiana here, aren't you?
I absolutely am, and I even see that 9.5, and 9.5 tells me it's the right side because I can't find a 10 anywhere. I'll tell you right now, Louisiana might have been in one-score games, but their yards per play difference was about 1.4 positive net yards per play last year. And it's not like their schedule was easy. You know how good some of those teams were in the Sun Belt, and they had that Iowa State game. But this is a similar situation. They're going to another Big 12 school who is transferring to the SEC now, and completely revamped, new quarterback. I'm not sure that they're going to beat Texas in Texas, but this team knows what it takes to win when it comes to those first games, obviously. So I think Texas is going to struggle against this team, and I don't see Texas blowing them out. So I'll take the 9.5. But I do agree with you. This will be probably a public play, and I think that it's going to go down to 7 and possibly even 6.5. So if you do like the Texas side, feel free to wait on that. And if you like my side, grab it now and try to middle it even later. Chris, come on. Let's hear what you got, buddy.
No, you said your piece, but yeah, the game that I like the first week of the year, I'm sure it's on everybody's radar, is South Alabama getting 1.5 against Southern Miss. Like, I'm not sure the right side is favored here. I mentioned Kane Womack before. He's back at South Alabama now as the head coach. Major Applewhite is on that coaching staff. They kind of got a defense that returns a bunch of starters. I think Southern Miss has some questions at the quarterback with Jack Abraham gone. They're going to run that 4-2-5. Jake Bentley, the South Carolina transfer, is going to be the starting quarterback for the Jaguars. This is a team that's been in some close games. They've been better, I think, than their record has indicated the last couple of years. But I'm going to take South Alabama plus the 1.5 at home against Southern Miss.
Fantastic play. That's the only other one I played was South Alabama.
Really?
Yeah, plus 1.5 so far. I'm going to make more plays. I'm starting to kind of get more into the lines now. I've been doing a lot of preseason football, still baseball and everything. But no, that's the only one I ever played. I like Bentley there. And South Alabama was on my radar last year. Yeah, they had some stinkers last year, but I thought the team was a little bit better than what they showed. So that was my only other play. Great job. Great call on that one, Ralph. Any best bets?
Well, you're going to be rooting for me because I am going Labor Day. And I'm going to go Mississippi laying the 8.5, 9, or 9.5. I just think he lays it on. Louisville's a team that struggled in the secondary. I don't think they could keep this pace of speed early on. So Ole Miss, Labor Day night, playing Louisville, laying the 8.5, 9 or 9.5, and you're going to have a good idea, Kiev, if your Heisman ticket is going to be looking good. They have another week to lay it on after
he better go for 404 against that secondary.
Yeah, the line's going to drop huge after that game. No, I'll have a good idea if they beat by 40, but yeah, I'm pretty low on Louisville, as you heard earlier. But no, I love the play too. Someone texted me like a month ago saying they're taking the other way. I'm like, are you sure? I was going to bet Ole Miss that game. I'm glad you said that because that gives me more conviction on Ole Miss. So great stuff, guys. Chris, where can everybody, our viewers, our listeners to this podcast, get your great information and plays before each week?
That Stanford Steve and the Bear podcast should be out by the time this one airs. We just recorded one on Wednesday morning, so that should be up. It should be up by now. We'll have a college football preseason column coming out next week. Game days on the road starting the 28th, which would be fantastic. So we are everywhere. We can find everywhere, and obviously always feel free to fire me something on Twitter, and I'll try and get back to you if I can.
All right, Ralph, where can our listeners and viewers find your great information and plays?
On the homepage at Wagertalk.com, just go to the Ralph Michaels page. I do want to mention that I did a free NFL preseason guide, NFL regular season guide, and a college football guide, which has all the schedules that we just talked about. All of them are available on the front page of goldsheet.com. You'll see the free guides. You don't need to register. You just click. It'll download the PDFs, and 3 clicks will get you all 3 guides.
And I gave you guys a tease to some of Ralph's information, sharing the screen, some of the amazing stuff and the hard work he puts into his offseason. Nobody works harder than these 2 guys. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show. Enjoy the season, and we'll be texting.
Thanks, guys.
All right, now it's time for a little UFC on ESPN 29. This segment is being brought to you by mybookie.ag. For a 100% sign-up bonus, please visit MyBookie. Use the promo code OddsBreakers. Terms, conditions, location apply. And we have a pretty decent, I would call it, main event with Jared Cannonier versus Kelvin Gastelum. Man, does Gastelum show up in a lot of these lower tier main event weekends. But anyway, I think I have a premium play for our subscribers on this one. But what we're here to talk about is the free play. And we're going to look towards Vince Pichel versus Austin Hubbard. It's on the main card. It's supposed to be the second fight unless anything switches around. Like if anybody has a COVID or a scratch, they sometimes switch these fights around. Vince is pretty old. I mean, 38 years old, 13-2. He rarely fights. He's like a once-a-year guy. There's an injury earlier in his career. He missed 2014 to 2017. But, he just shows up. And, it's the way he likes it. He's a pretty good ground and pound grappler. He knows how to get people on the ground. He doesn't submit, but he's got a fantastic floor game. And he's fighting a guy in Austin Hubbard that's coming in with a lot of hype. He's younger. He's 29 years old, 13-5, 5 KOs, 2 submissions, and 6 decisions. You can forget the submission. He hasn't done that in a long time. He's a stand-up fighter. He's going to try to beat him standing up. But unfortunately for Hubbard, he seems to fight a lot of these guys that are really good grapplers. He's been losing those fights, like Joe Selecki, Marco Madsen, and Madsen's actually fighting in this event himself against Clay Guida. And that's going to be a really interesting showdown. But, looking back at this one, I like to fade the hype on some of the things. And to be honest with you, I haven't seen what Hubbard has done. He's beaten some middle-class fighters, nobody too big, but he's going to have his work cut out with Vince because that's kind of his weakness. You look at Vince, he's 13-2, 6-2 in the UFC, and he's fought some pretty good fighters. Damian Brown, he's beat and knocked out Joaquim Silva by decision. His loss was Gregory Gillespie, and Gillespie's a dang good fighter, and that was a arm triangle. But anyways, for this bout, Vince certainly gives the better resume, in my opinion. And he's the better ground fighter. And that's what's going to happen. He's going to try to get on top of Austin and ground and pound. So I'm not sure why Austin is a slight favorite in some of these books. Austin is minus 115. Okay. And Vince is around minus 105. I actually grabbed it at minus 107. But, if you look at all these different books, you can shop it around and see if you can get the best price you can. But in my opinion, this price is all about the age thing, right? And I don't think it really reflects the fact that Vince is going to take him down. And what we saw with Austin is that he is very susceptible to that. I think Vince could win by KO. He's probably not going to win by submission, but there's also a really good chance that this fight goes to decision because Vince has 5 decisions. A lot of them were recently. His last, let's see here, 2 fights were decisions. His last 3 fights were decisions. Okay. He hasn't submitted anyone in years. So, got to go. Actually, he's never submitted someone. Scratch that. He's only lost by submission once and once by KO. But we're going to go with him just nice and easy at the minus 107 for a couple of stars.
The only thing I'm addicted to right now is winning.
Look at the rest of the card. There's some decent fights on the card. Like I said, Clay Guida versus Mark Madsen is going to be interesting. Chase Sherman versus Parker Porter. Some big boys there. Alexander Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. It's not a bad card. And, it's a good thing college football hasn't started just yet because, I want to get as much MMA as I can in before the season starts. I still watch MMA during the college football season, but it gets downgraded in screens, If you have a couple tablets, if you have a couple TVs, it's usually the one downgraded. It might even make it down to just my phone, okay? But unless it's a big event, unless it's a pay-per-view. But either way, pretty excited for this card, and I think it's going to be a fun weekend with a little bit of NFL preseason. My friends, if you have any questions about any of the topics we covered, please feel free to tweet us at the Odds Breakers. A huge thanks to Chris Fallica from ESPN for coming on the show and Ralph Michaels from Wagertalk. Everybody, enjoy your weekend, enjoy the fights, enjoy NFL preseason, and go get some winners.